He was a charming con man, a master manipulator, a little bit like Donna Adelson, maybe, and eventually a serial killer. Before Scott Kimball became one of the FBI's most notorious informants turned predators, there were warning signs in his early life, signs that most of us would have missed. But my guest tonight, retired FBI Special Agent Jonny Grusing, he didn't miss them, and the ones he may have missed, he caught writing his book. We're about to talk to him.
Welcome to the global phenomenon, Surviving the Survivor. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning journalist, Joel Waldman.
What's up, SGS Nation? Welcome to Surviving the Survivor. This is the show that brings you the very best guests in all of true crime. And if you're into true crime, there's a serial killer out there now behind bars, Scott Kimball. He is a smooth talking fraudster who turned into an absolutely cold-blooded killer. And joining us to discuss him and how it's affected other cases and how the FBI looks at serial killers and other criminal cases. Here is retired FBI agent Jonny Grusing, special agent Jonny Grusing, who's a special guy, and I mean it in a good way. I was humbled and honored to write a blurb for this book. The title is The Devil I Knew. Jonny, welcome to Surviving the Survivor. It's been too long. How are you?
Hey, Joel. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, love having you back. So I know that the main title is The Devil. You have a funky subtitle to it.
Yeah, the subtitle is Unmasking a Serial Killer.
There you go. Unmasking a serial killer, which is something everyone in true crime is really, to me, the reason I got into true crime, my dad was a psychiatrist and my mother is a licensed social worker. So I am fascinated by the psychology of these people, how their minds work. I was telling you, we just got off the Adelson case, which, if you're not into the particular case, a lot of times you don't know the details, but this is a family in South Florida where the husband was a very successful dentist. The mother sort of ran the family. The son was a periodontist driving a Ferrari. The daughter was an attorney. One son is estranged, but this family went from all this success to wanting the grandchildren of Wendy's children and Donna Adelson's grandchildren to move to Miami instead of being stuck at FSU where her husband was a professor. They couldn't make it happen, and ultimately they had their son-in-law murdered. And it's just one of these cases where, you've got a lot of difficult divorces, a lot of bitter custody battles, but who are these people that take it to the next step? And this applies, I think, with Scott Kimball, who, for full disclosure, I don't know much about. But obviously a guy who, if you met, in a supermarket line waiting to check out, he was kind of a charming guy. Tell us a little bit about Scott, who he was, where he was from.
Yeah, Joel. Yeah, let's talk about your family some later. That sounds real interesting. Did you say Adelson?
Adelson, yeah.
Yeah. Let's bring them back up after we go through a little bit of this.
Sure.
Yeah, Scott grew up here in Colorado, near Boulder, Colorado. I learned more about him when writing and going back through not only the victim families, but talking to his mom's partner. His mom and dad divorced when Scott was about 10. And his mom had a life partner. Her name's Kay. And I think when Scott found out his mom was gay, he started hating women. And yet he told me one time he had sex with, who knows what the truth is with Scott, but he said he had sex with 50 some women and he gave a list of their names one time. I wouldn't doubt it though, Joel, because like you said, he's charming, but I think he started using women to get back at his mom starting at age 16, 17, and started learning how to manipulate women. And the best term I can use is love bombing. I mean, when I went back to talk to some of the girls he dated in high school, they would not receive one rose or a dozen roses, but 5 or 6 or 10 dozen roses when they would be on their porch or coming home, and they would have a boyfriend, and Scott didn't care. He would the challenge to him early on was to make people do things they wouldn't normally do. And so if he could get a girl away from her boyfriend or get someone to like him, he threw all of his energy and talent in manipulating people. And I think it started with women, girls.
And tell me again, how old was he when he finds out that his mother is gay?
10.
10 years old. Listen, I mean, and he's how old is Scott? He's in state prison now, correct?
Yeah, he's in state prison. He's been there for about 20 years now. It's almost 20 years next year. And he's 58 now.
Yeah, so he's roughly our age, Johnny. And, that was definitely, I don't want to make us sound like these old timer geezer types, but it was a different time. Like, I was just talking about the Menendez brothers on Court TV last night. I think their case would have been looked at much differently as it relates to the alleged sexual abuse, much differently now than, let's say, in 1989. But when Scott Kimball's 10 years old, for your mother to be openly gay was probably much more difficult, I would imagine, than it is today. So, I mean, again, it sounds like it had a really difficult, a very strong effect on his outlook on life, right?
Yeah, and we all do this to some extent, blame other people for our bad behavior, but he started blaming his mom for divorcing his dad very early. And he was well into that when I started listening to his prison phone calls. I got the case in 2006. Scott had been up in a jail in Montana. Joel, when I do a lot of speaking on this, and the best term I can give for him so people will understand him is a Dementor from Harry Potter. He would just steal everything from you if he can. Yeah, he will just, and if it happens to be your life, he will make sure that it is clean. I believe he started killing at age 18, and then he was killing for a good 20 years. By the time, we finally put him in jail for check fraud forgery, but then we start finding out this guy has been making people disappear for a long time.
Wow. So this is a fascinating case because this guy, as we mentioned in the intro, was actually an informant for the Bureau, which is kind of wild because obviously you have to have a degree of, not just congeniality, but you've got to have a degree of trust, right? You're going to trust this guy a little bit. And here's a guy that's not only essentially fooling, the people who he is ultimately killing and taking their lives, like you just said, but he's fooling some of the smartest law enforcement officers that there are. But tell us, so 2006, how long had you been in the FBI? And how do you get the case handed to you? What do they say? Hey, Agent Kimble, there's a guy that's writing fraudulent checks, or is it, hey, Agent Kimble, we think this guy is really sinister. We don't know what's going on. Get to the bottom of it.
So, yeah, Joel, first of all, I'd been in the FBI for 10 years by then. I got in September of 96. I knew I was signing up for something that might be fun, but I had no idea it's going to be this type of roller coaster ride. Working serial killers, if you'd told me 100 things I might be doing for the FBI, that would not be on there. But I'm 10 years in. I've worked a lot of bank robbery cases, some kidnapping, some prison homicides, but two dads of two missing girls walked in to my boss's office. One dad, his name's Bob Markham, had been looking for his daughter, Jennifer, for 3 years. And he had figured out through his own investigation that Scott Kimble was responsible. But an FBI agent who was handling Scott, we are bound not to disclose the name of an informant because that can get them killed. Nobody knows. Nobody wants their family member to be an informant for the FBI. I doubt you would want that, even though you're pro law enforcement, et cetera, because there's certain risk that if you're reporting on your friends to law enforcement, you're going to get hurt or worse. So when when a person reports on criminal activity and they're an informant, the FBI and even other law enforcement will agree to keep their identity secret. So this dad, Bob Markham, kept bumping up into the case agent saying, I think your informant made my daughter disappear. And the agent, it's like you see on TV, could not confirm or deny. He's in a bad spot. But dad keeps coming like a force of nature, like a wave crashing against, the shore. Yeah. Because he won't give up. And then finally, he brings another dad in who had lost his daughter. Last was Scott. And that's when I get the case. It was 2 missing girls, and possibly Scott's uncle, Uncle Terry, had also disappeared.
Now you had to ask yourself questions at this point, like why, like a little more. Obviously, law enforcement always knows more than the public, so that this guy's your informant, and you got to be wondering, why is he telling me that the guy who's acting as our informant might also be my daughter's killer, right? So you kind of have to keep a poker face, but are you then like, how do you, after that conversation, like, how do you pick up what's your next move after a conversation like that?
It's to do my homework or my research. So I grabbed the case file, and he was reporting, Scott as an informant was reporting on a murder for hire out of the federal prison. Like I said, the Dementor analogy, Scott was stealing from people all the time. Sometimes it's check fraud. Sometimes it's credit card. Sometimes it's your truck. Sometimes it's, anything. People were losing everything to this man. And the closer you got to him, the more you lost. So as you know, Joel, it's not a crime of violence to steal something. So those people are in and out of jail pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. But Scott used that opportunity of being in jail to befriend people, cellmates, at their lowest, when they're in jail for the first time, their life's falling apart, they can't get to their girlfriend, and Scott would come in as a rescuer and say, hey. And he had all these different cons that he would do, but the most effective one is, hey, look, I'm going to tell you my life story. I was raped when I was a child. My mother let this man, Ted, a neighbor, sexually assault me for 10 years, and it really jacked me up. And you know what I do? I'm a bounty hunter. I'm basically a gun for hire. I kill people. And if you need someone killed, I'm your man, or I can make it happen. So there's not much when you disclose something that makes you very vulnerable, like I was raped when I was a child, and you put yourself out there like that, then you get that other person's defenses down. And so then the cellmate would share with them, okay, my life's falling apart. My girlfriend needs this. She's into stripping. I'm really concerned about her, or I need to get away with her to Mexico, or, whatever it is. And Scott says, I can help you. And so then what, unless you're brand new, the worst thing you can do as an inmate is to disclose your charges or anything about you to another cellmate, because what? Information is power. Not only outside of prison, but especially in prison. Mm-hmm. Scott would then package up that information and turn around to the FBI. Eventually, at first, Joel, it was local law enforcement back in Montana and then in Spokane. He figured out that him committing these check frauds and forgeries, he would cop to them all the time, but he would trade people are about to be killed. And he knew that we in law enforcement would make that trade any day. You're going to let someone off for writing a bad check, or you're going to save a life. Right. And he would have extracted enough information from cellmate to make it look like cellmate wanted someone killed, because Scott had offered it, but he takes himself out of the equation.
Right.
So wow. Yeah, so when you say it's true, he was tricking some very bright people in the FBI, but just like any sport takes thousands of hours of shooting the ball correctly or kicking the ball, Scott had thousands of hours and many, many arrests of seeing how law enforcement worked, what we prioritized, how we treated information when it came in, and the lengths at which we would vet it. So he was a pro at this game, and the FBI had no idea who they were signing up.
Yeah, so this is kind of fascinating. So this guy, in essence, is kind of like a career criminal, but he's like on a level, he's studying you guys. He's studying law enforcement, and he knows how to use his bargaining chip. So he would get whatever information or fabricate whatever information he could get to get you guys to sort of bend to his needs, get himself out, and it was like a rinse and repeat type situation. Now you said he killed, I think, for the first time at age 18. Just for context, when you start dealing with him again, I think it's 2006. Like, how old is he at this point?
2006, Scott would be 40, right?
So he'd been killing for 22 years at that point, really.
Yeah.
And when you met him originally to start working on this case, I assume you had no idea that this guy was a killer at that point.
No, nobody did. Not even his family, not his wives. He'd been married 3 times.
Wow.
Nobody knew he was a killer except his victims, and they don't say anything, right? Because he made sure, Joel, that he did a great job of isolating them. And, there's some principles that I learned, again, from Scott that really helps me when a child would disappear in the future, or a spouse, or they wind up dead, is especially if it's someone that you're familiar with, you have to isolate them from the people who are protecting them, or else you're going to get caught. And because Scott had been killing, anybody that says, I've got a lot of experience, I've got 20 years doing sales or whatever else, if you've got 20 years of making people disappear, you are an expert at doing it.
Yeah, no doubt. So I'm just curious. So let's go back to the beginning of your handling of this case. Again, it's like literally 22 years into his killing career, for lack of a better phrase. And you pick up the case and you get these 2 fathers who say their daughters are missing, and you start to put together the pieces. And at this point, he is an informant. Let's start there first, I think. How and when did he become an informant for you guys?
So he first became an FBI informant, which he had been prior with another federal agency and then 2 local agencies for like 5 years prior, before becoming an FBI informant. That started in Alaska. And it was the scheme that I told you. You befriend your cellmate, you say you've been sexually assaulted, you're a hitman, and you get them to disclose. And then he turned around to the FBI and said, my cellmate's going to kill people unless you use me to save these lives. And it sounded really good. Plus he gets the cellmate to talk on a recorded line to an undercover agent, and the cellmate's thinking he's going to get his check fraud case thrown out when Scott has given the backstory that he wants these people killed. So the FBI is hearing one thing on the line while he has the cellmate saying another. So the code, Joel, that he used is the fish is fat. So you understand, by doing as much true crime stuff as you've done by now, that any prison phone call is recorded, right? There's no right to privacy on those.
Right.
So they don't talk plainly like you and I are talking now. They'll use code if they want something to happen.
Well, that's so fascinating. Again, not to go harp on the Adelsons, but they one of the reasons that the mother and the son are now convicted killers is that they were using code. The her husband, Donna, the matriarch of the family, her husband's birthday present that they talked about was the murder, right? And they had all these different code words. There was a TV repairman that was code for the hitman. So there were all these code words that they use, and sometimes they would trip up on their own code words. And I just interviewed 3 of the jurors, and they said that was part of the reason that they convicted, is that they couldn't keep number 1, innocent people don't speak in code, and number 2, they couldn't keep all the code together. But one question I had, so this story that he would tell about being sexually assaulted at 18, was there truth to that? Was he sexually assaulted, or did he just make this up out of thin air?
Well, I address this quite a bit in the book, and I don't come down too hard on one side or the other. I try to let the reader decide. I give them the facts of what I know about Scott, which is he has manipulated the legal system for his entire life, going back to age 18, and then how badly he manipulated the local police departments and the FBI in 3 different jurisdictions. It was Alaska, Washington, and Denver. And the stories that he told, and basically how he functioned as a con man. He admits to being a con man, and he's very, very good at it. So I don't come down hard that Ted Payton never molested him, but I also don't say it ever happened. So it's one of those things. I interviewed Ted Payton. He's the supposed rapist 3 different times, twice at his house, once at a Starbucks. And, you know,
Yeah.
if you assault,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so if you assault a child, you're never going to confess to it, most likely, unless it does you some type of good. So, but some of the reasons that Ted gave me, being that Scott was only after his money, and that Scott did get paid a civil settlement, and then seeing that Scott tried to kill his own wife, both of his kids, his uncle for money, tried to kill his own mom for money. Then you look at his pattern of behavior, and I just have a hard time thinking that this happened. And I think you use the term predator or predatory behavior. Scott was a predator starting age 13, 14. And that a predator would allow Ted, a smaller man, to control and dominate him up until he's 21 years old. I couldn't see it, but I'm also not saying it never happened. So I'm letting the reader decide that.
Yeah. And just back to, one of the things I'm curious about, is one of the lessons going back in time to sort of see the origin story of these people. Does that help you? And what, other than finding out his mother was gay at age 10, how did he grow up? Did he grow up in poverty? Did he grow up in, like you see in the movies, in a trailer home where he's frustrated? No. So what was his childhood like?
No, both Barb and Kay. So they cared for him here in Colorado, and Barb ran an insurance agency. She made good money, lived in a nice house.
Wow.
Both are very compassionate human beings. He had a younger brother, Scott did, maybe 2 years younger than him. They had everything they needed. Younger brother turned out to be an airline pilot, successful, family, all that stuff. Scott, no. Mom told me, it takes a while to befriend the mom of a serial killer because she blames herself, and so does society. They blame her for the way her son turned out. And Joel, I've worked mass attacks as well. I've been in the living room of a family after their son has committed a horrific act, and I've seen that 10,000-yard stare of like, we can't believe our own child did this. And then they go through the self-blame and things they missed and whatever else. But it's just by the grace of God, any of our kids turn out well. We can throw all of ourselves we can into parenting, but my 2 kids are in a good place, and I'm just grateful.
Yeah, and we just saw that recently with the tragic Charlie Kirk assassination. I saw that all over. That immediately people said, well, this guy, the alleged assassin's father, is actually a law enforcement agent. How could this have happened? But you're right. You can only raise kids and try to do your best. And just 2 cases that we've done recently, there's some really bad apples that grew off of the family tree, and then there was a couple of good ones. So I guess that's tough to tell. But I remember now at one point, actually, I was hoping to talk to Scott's mother, and I don't know how she's feeling about that now. But in general, I assume she's still with us. Last time we talked, she was.
She's not. Yeah, she passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. But so was she able to? I don't know. Come to terms is not the right word. You're never going to come to terms with that. But was she able to, I guess, forgive herself a little bit and just realize, I guess, that maybe she had a bad seed here?
Yeah, she was. It's very difficult for someone like her to move forward and to not put her head in the sand and want no one to talk to her for the rest of her life. Barb was able to, after a year or 2, start talking, and she talked to myself and Gary Thatcher. He was the Lafayette PD investigator who was phenomenal to work with. But we would spend hours at her kitchen table talking with her and Kay about Scott. And when you say bad seed, there's few people. I think we take responsibility for our own actions. I think we have the way to choose right and wrong. But I do think every once in a while, there's just a kid born. You don't want to call Damien the omen evil, but that's why I didn't title this lightly, The Devil I Knew, in this saying all people are devils. Like, this is the only, I met maybe one other person who was evil in 25 years of working violent crime. And Scott had allowed evil into his heart, his soul, his mind. And you can't see it up front. It's not like he gives off a vibe or something. He gives off a vibe that he's harmless. One of the quotes for the book was Sheriff White, where we were out in Utah recovering bodies. And Scott is just able to get your defenses down, get you laughing, make you think he's a good guy. Sheriff White's quote in reflection was, he just seems like this little happy fat guy who's not dangerous. But you can tell he would kill you in a second once you see him looking at you. And that's him. So for Barb started seeing that side of him, but it's almost like, and I've seen it with other parents, it's almost like these scales have to fall off your eyes for you to then start going back through and evaluating your child and saying, yeah, there were warning signs at age 5. And Barb told me this when they would be in the living room. This is one thing she remembered. And Scott points to a wall and says, Mom, that's gray. And she goes, no, that's green, Scott. That's a green wall. No, that's gray. And then her partner, Kay, she said at about age 6 or 7, she pulls up in the drive and she comes back out after visiting with Barb, and there's dents all up and down her car. And she could hear someone jumping on it while she was inside. And she goes out to Scott and his brother Brett and said, what's happening here? Brett and they first deny it. Then she's like, you two were the only ones in the garage. And I see the dents right here. I could hear it happening. And Brett's like, yeah, we did. And Scott's like, nope, never happened. So that was at age like 7.
Yeah. So, yes. So he's like pathological. One of the things, and I have been doing this long enough, and I'm fortunate enough to have met a lot of FBI agents, and again, I am very pro law enforcement, and I consider you guys heroes. I really do. But it's much different, like, than the movies, right? So, movies are all action, running around, yanking your gun out of your holster. But here you're talking about sitting at a kitchen table with Scott's mother and his family, and you're now recalling these childhood stories. What in this particular case, what was the process like? Like it's a very slow, painstaking, sort of methodical process. I'll be honest, it's something I don't think I could do. I've got ADHD. I run around. That's why I do podcasting. I can jump from one story to the next. But you're like, neck deep in this, and I can tell, like, Jonny Grusing is a thinking man's man. I could tell you would go home and you would probably sit there and wonder about, like, what did I miss in this story, or what was it about that story? So tell me a little bit about the investigative process and how it's different from what you see in TV and the movies.
Yeah, that's really good points, Joel. Especially in this case, but I've seen it even when we have just one victim. Law enforcement, we have a tendency to chase rabbit trails, and a rabbit trail is something that keeps you from your focal, mission, which is to convict Scott and keeping him in prison for the rest of his life. So when I'm talking to Barb, that's years down the road, after we've filed charges on him, and I'm going back to understand how many people this man has killed, and then to see, because we filed 4 once we recovered 3 of our 4 victims, and he confessed to the 4th. Two were 2 of the daughters that we talked about earlier, then another girl, and then his uncle Terry. But then we start seeing that he's responsible for a lot, and he started getting really excited when we went on our body hunts in Utah and up in Vail and whatever else. He would talk to cellmates because he would relive killing these people, but then he would blab about the number 17 and how he would torture people and how he would pink mist hunters just for fun. In other words, you blow their head off. And then he would drown someone when he was in a raft. He said he killed he kept saying this story, Joel. He said he was 13, 14 when he killed a kid for the first time. He said he was a Boy Scout. They were on a rafting trip. There's a heavyset kid that he didn't like. The kid falls over, and Scott says, I just held his head underwater until I killed him. And it's not a true story, but he kept saying it over and over again.
Wow.
And so as the
reason were you able to, so you were able to corroborate that never actually happened, but it's got to be like bone chilling to hear him tell you that. And kind of, it's like, we're going right back to the car story. Like the mother sees the stomp marks on the hood and he's telling her, no, I wasn't out there. And he's telling you now, no, I drowned this kid. And I don't know if you had the information at the time, and you're probably telling him, no, you didn't. You know, I interviewed this guy. He's still alive. How weird is that?
Well, yeah, he was telling cellmates that. So what the cellmates, so say a cellmate's in for, I don't know, theft or auto theft or drugs or whatever. And he worked cellmates the same way he worked us. He would give them the murder card and say, look, you can get out of jail if you talk about this, but please don't do it. And, you know, he's basically teeing it up on a golf ball, so they'll come talk to me. And so they would come and talk about, you know, he killed someone when he was 13, Boy Scout, et cetera, et cetera. But knowing, and Scott's goal was to rat out, to make his cellmate become a rat, which if you're a rat in prison, you're going to get yourself killed. So he's teeing that guy up. And then he's also making me do extra work, which he loved to do. I mean, we had a very dysfunctional relationship. My wife would call it a marriage to a serial killer, but that's a whole different deal.
Yeah.
But he loved, Joel, pulling me back, even after we convicted him of 4, and taunting me with not only the one girl we couldn't find, that's Jennifer. Jennifer was the daughter of the dad who was knocking on our door for 3 years. And we believe today Scott took us to a canyon. We were in lots of canyons in Utah looking for these girls that he killed. We think he took us close, but not close enough, just to be an I'm smarter than you.
So she has never been recovered.
Correct.
Now, I don't know you well, Johnny, but I know you well enough. And for those who don't know, Johnny played Division I basketball. You're competitive, and I know you want to know where that body is, and you're retired now. I mean, how frustrating is that? I mean, there must be a point where you want to grab this guy by his shirt collar in the interview room. And I know you guys can't. It's cool in the movies. Too bad you can't do it in real life. But like, how frustrating is it that it would drive me crazy if I couldn't kind of like out finagle this guy to get that information? But these guys are good, man, right?
Yeah, well, thanks for bringing that up, Joel. You know, what is it? Cut, lemon juice, that sort of thing. No, but you're exactly right. That's the hardest part of working cases like this. And there were some missing kids we could never find. One was Beth Miller, who disappeared in Idaho Springs in 1984. And, you know, I threw my all at that case for 10 years or so, on and off. It's not something I work full time, but and the FBI is still working it. It's however many years down the road now from that. But with Scott and with Jennifer, I became allies and eventually, I would say, friends with her dad, Bob, who was very against the FBI, and rightfully so. But it's because I worked as hard as I could on behalf of Bob Markham and Jennifer's sister, Jennifer's mom, all of those around her, to find what he did to her. And Scott would draw me maps. I mean, as long as this room, and send them to me in the mail from prison mail, and they would be detailed. It would have keys and where he buried Jennifer. And if I would come talk to him again, he would give me the final clues. And this was over a 10-year period after we convicted him. So I spent, 4 years investigating him, 10 afterwards, and then, a little bit before I retired. So him taunting me because he knew what you just surmised, that I am driven, I'm competitive. And you talk about basketball. Yeah, I'm still immature. If I lose in a game of horse, I'll punt the ball or something. I don't know. But you take your competitiveness in basketball and you multiply it by 10 if you're working on behalf of a family. And I can walk away. And I think if you would bring Jennifer's dad on the show, I would brief him after all of my meetings with Scott and say, here's the map. Here's what he told me. Don't think she's there. Sheriffs went out and looked again, and he would be grateful, but frustrated himself. So.
Did he get like a joy out of you guys coming? This was captured fairly well in the Netflix show, to a degree, Mindhunter, which is also loosely based on one of our best guest work, who's Ann Burgess, who helped, develop criminal profiling. But when you would go visit him, that must have been like, he must have salivated at that, because here's all this attention. Here's a way for him to drop some clues, but not, how often, I guess, my question is, did you go visit him? And was it like that? Was he, ecstatic to see you guys, because he could kind of now get into that mindset of playing these games?
So I think I've heard, Joel, that a shark has to be swimming or else it will die, right? I don't know if that's true or not, but with Scott, if he wasn't able to manipulate, control, be in charge, doing something in prison that kept his mind and his manipulative abilities, his narcissism fed, then yeah, I think that's when he would summon me, which was fairly often. And Jennifer would be a tease. Another tease was when he said he would confess to all his homicides, and that's after we brought the profilers out. The profilers and I spent the profilers, first of all, they were phenomenal through this. I leaned on them heavily, learned a ton about human behavior and how to wrestle with someone like Scott, but eventually brought them out. That was, I think, 2011. So 5 years down the road, we spent a 12-hour day with him, recording it, video, and he talked about how smart he was. He wanted to show off for them. And then we spent another 4 hours the next day. And that was the victim day, about how all these people had raped him. It wasn't just Ted. It was his babysitter when he was 10. It was his stepmom. It was his Uncle Terry. And he figured out, oh yeah, I need to be a victim if they need to see that as well. And that's what he was. He was a chameleon that could just shift and move. But after they left, he said, all right, Grusing, come on out here. I'll tell you about all the people I killed. And my boss went out with me, because I never met with him alone.
Mm-hmm.
And he started talking about the people that he killed in the U.S. And he had us look at maps without showing him. Like the one I remember was a hitchhiker near Devil's Lake in Utah. And he goes, I killed the guy. I just shot him in the head. And I dragged him by a barbed wire fence and put him on the east side of Devil's Reservoir. So you're going to find him near this barbed wire fence under here.
Mm-hmm.
And why'd you kill him? Oh, he's just a hitchhiker. I just wanted to kill somebody. Mm-hmm. And then he went on, and there were 21 different people. And this is on top of the 4 that we already killed. And so he said his killing period was from 1986 to 2006. So 20 years. But then I told him, because it seemed like too matter of fact, it was like, he's playing with us. But I said, all right, Scott, I don't know why you're doing this. My guess is, some type of game. And he goes, no, this isn't a game. Take notes. Mm-hmm. This will be worth your time. So, and I say this in the book, Joel, how many of those victims do you think we recovered out of the 21, considering we had down to the barbed wire fence? How many would you guess?
Next to very few.
Yeah, as in like zero.
Right? Yeah. I mean, so that was my next question. You just threw out, I just did the math. I think it was like 25 at that point. Do you have a rough idea of how many murders this guy commit? I know do you end up convicting on 4 or 7 or something?
4.
Okay, 4.
Yeah.
So you end up convicting on 4. How many, if you had to guess, how many kills do you think he has?
Well, so there's the 21, and he told me with the 21 additional. And when I called him back, because I didn't go back to the prison, it was a hike out there. Mm-hmm. I said, Scott, playing around with this again, I get it. I don't know why. And he goes, no, this is a puzzle. There's a truth to every one of these. You've got to figure it out. Mm. So one of the puzzle pieces, Joel, was that 13-year-old drowning the kid and whatever else, know. But for Scott, it would be, instead of that being in Montana and a 13-year-old boy, he was in Idaho, and it was a 60-year-old woman. But without having his little answer key in his head, because I ran it past our profilers, our cryptography people, and whatever else. And
Mm-hmm.
He knew it, since only he had the key, that he couldn't. But he ended up, so he told me that he, with his attorneys, we tried to do a global plea agreement in 2014 when he said again, but he only would tell his attorneys. We shipped him to and from prison from the FBI office, met with his attorneys probably 5 or 6 times. And they finally walked away from the table. They said, because the deal was he doesn't get the death penalty as long as we clear up all these homicides across the Western United States.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would go, they would brief us on the number 10, 20, 30, 45. It was between 45 and 50 when they walked away.
Wow.
And yeah, they were bound by, as attorneys, they could not tell us unless we offered them a plea agreement, and they told us he would get the death penalty if we told you what he told us.
Well, so, I mean, he's got to be at 45 or 50. He's got to be one of the most prolific serial killers in the country, without a doubt. You mentioned, unless I misheard you, I thought you said something about murders in the United States. Did he kill anyone elsewhere? Did I mishear that?
Well, we don't know, Joel, but they did. When he was 17, he got kicked out of his dad's house up in Montana. So he was going back and forth his late teen years from Montana to Colorado because he was getting in so much trouble as a late teenager.
Mm-hmm.
Gets kicked out of dad's house. Grandma says no. So he goes up across the Canadian border, and he spends a couple months out there before Canada deports him as a 17-year-old.
Oh boy.
And his attorneys asked us if we had connections with the Royal Mounted National Police. And the only reason they would ask us that is because he told them he killed someone up there. So,
So I've still got some questions if you got a little bit of time.
Sure.
I just want to get, because I wrote a book. What was the writing process like? This is, I assume, your first book, unless I'm mistaken. But what was the writing process? Can be difficult. How did you? I assume you probably went through, your case file a bit and then put it all together. It must have been tough to do over it because there's so many years with this guy and so many stories. What was that process like?
Yeah, it was humbling, Joel. I mean, it was really ugly for me as well. Yeah, you think, because I had written so many affidavits and whatever, and I tell stories all the time because I tell the Kimball story, I tell Henthorne, a guy who was killing his wives. I love to talk to psychology classes and criminal justice classes on how to identify dangerous people. So I'm a storyteller.
Yeah. By the way, real quick for our audience, Jonny also worked on the Barry Morphew case. You just can't talk about it now; they'll be annoyed. But there you go. So that case is happening right now. But yeah. So what was it like to actually what's it? It's one thing to tell stories and schmooze, and then put the written word on paper, right?
Yeah. So I tried, Joel, the first time. My boss told me, because he was the same supervisor that the two dads came into, and once we figure out this guy is been tricking us, he's been playing with the FBI, and then you see how complex this is going to be. He's like, you should take notes and journal, whatever, turn this into a story one day. So I did. I kept notes. So every day that I deal with this man or investigate or find something new. So I had like 140 pages of notes, but I didn't know how to write. I turned them over to 2 authors after it was done who wanted to write a book. They struggled with it for a couple years. Wrote, like your, whatever it is, your piece that you send in to publishers, and it just kind of fell apart. So then I tried writing a book, just factual, because it was so bad what he did to not only us, but these other law enforcement agencies, these families, that I didn't want to put any emotion in there or my perspective, because I didn't want to armchair quarterback anyone. And then that was really bad. I turned that in to the FBI because we have to get it approved. It's called pre-publication.
Yeah.
And they sat on it, didn't know what to do with it. They called me, and it was not a fun phone call, Joel, because they were just politely trying to say, we don't judge material, but you can't write this like this, and it was, I felt, I didn't feel like it was a good product either.
Mm-hmm.
So I got really good advice from one of the authors I had turned it into other. And he goes, just make it into conversations.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to get every fact right. because I was very careful. Kimball said this, I said this, the attorney said this.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, just turn it into, put us there like we're watching and listening and the
Mm-hmm.
dialogue, and make it a conversation flow. And that really took the pressure off.
Yeah.
So I remember more the gist of the conversations and, you know, us going back and forth, and whether it's with the dads or Kimball or the sheriff, or that let it flow. And then I had some really trusted people look it over and just tear it apart. And we put it back together and tore it apart. So I bet you went through something similar.
Yeah. It's a very tough process, no doubt. I mean, you talked about this at the beginning. I guess let's pick three. Like, if there's three lessons that you learned from investigating Scott Kimball that you could carry over to other or offer to other law enforcement officers who are going to watch this, I guess, what are the top three lessons that you learned from this case?
Well, one came from Larissa. Larissa is Scott's second wife and the mother of his children. And Scott abducted her for 4 years and would take polygraph tests. He would rush to the police, take a polygraph test, pass it, and then make Larissa look like a fool and look like she's going to be trying to get custody of her children. And then he would get worse and worse and worse. And so he just treated her so badly and manipulated not only her, but law enforcement and families. And her perspective at the end is she has major trust issues and she verifies everything before she moves forward. And I see that sometimes we as investigators will take shortcuts. Scott lived in the shortcuts that law enforcement takes. Like, again, he would dangle the, hey, you want to save lives? You know, these people are about to get killed, and rush to that without checking A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and making sure everything that he says lines up factually.
Mm-hmm.
But he would give you enough markers to where if you're not checking everything, it all looks good and shiny, and so you pursue it. And he had that down. So I just say, do your homework. And it's hard to do it all, but you can't cut corners at all, especially the more important the case. You have to do your very detailed homework. Sometimes, like with Scott, finding Casey, one of his victims, came down to a receipt in a trash bag. So you don't know what's important in a case, and you have to do everything because when you cut a corner, you miss things.
Yeah, that's interesting about the receipt. I assume he's serving a life sentence in Colorado in state prison.
He is. So they transferred him after he had a parolee try to fly a helicopter into Sterling Prison and rescue him. That was in 2017, 2018.
What happened with that?
We called it pixie dust, Joel. If you're, remember I said I never interviewed him alone?
Yeah.
So when you're alone with him and a cellmate, it's like he sprinkles this fairy dust on you and you go do his bidding.
Really?
And this guy his name's Jimmy. He had been in prison for 40 years for attempted homicide. He was really excited to get out, but Scott turned Jimmy into a human torpedo, saying that if you go fly this helicopter in, risk your life for me, I will pay you $1 million. And Jimmy even had a little map with a fence post of where the million was. And he was ready to do it. He was ready to do a kamikaze mission to fly Scott out. But we exposed the plot. We did calls into the prison. We even brought a fake attorney in to represent how it was going to happen. So we charged Scott with escape there. But that was only one of 10 to 12 schemes he had. So eventually Colorado sent him to Florida saying, we can't handle this inmate anymore. And Florida sent us their worst inmate. And I called Florida, the prison, and said, you have no idea who you're getting. And the lieutenant was like, I got this. I'm like, okay. So he was in Florida for a year. Mm-hmm. And then he gets transferred to like Kentucky. And then he was in Kentucky for a year. And they finally sent him to the Florence. That's where the Supermax is.
The Supermax, yeah.
The ADX. It's for the worst of the worst prisoners.
So that's where he is.
Correct.
I smell a movie based on your book, Johnny. Let me ask you this. I assume the answer is no. Do you think he's changed at all? If you went in there today to talk to him, is he still going to try to pull the wool over your eyes?
It depends on who you are. Yeah. If you're a cop, he'll tell you what you want to hear. He'll still do the same shtick. Like, oh, you're from where? You're from LA? Oh, I've got something for you. Didn't so and so disappear in LA? And then next thing you know, he's like, oh my gosh, I've stumbled on, I can solve, and you'll think you've struck gold. No, that part of him can't change. It's hardwired into him.
Yeah. I mean, he must have, I hate to say this, but he must have a fairly high IQ. He must be a pretty smart guy because he's got to keep these stories together and also have like I guess like the EQ, like the emotional intelligence to be able to fake you guys out a little bit, right?
There you go. It's better EQ than IQ. I watched this, Joel, in the desert when we were in Utah looking for these girls, and he would see a new sergeant walk up. He could see the sergeant bars. He could see how the guy was, his age and whatever else. And he would say, hey, I bet you worked hard to get those sergeant bars on there. And I see this, and you look like an outdoorsman. And do you like to hunt? And it's like Sherlock freaking Holmes. You know, he will look at you and assess you within 5 to 10 seconds, figure out what makes you tick, and then he'll start pulling.
Yeah.
So yeah, his EQ, that's a great way to put it. I've never said that. Can I borrow that from you?
Yeah, absolutely. Please.
But it was off the charts. You know, he never completed high school, but his spelling's not great. He doesn't care about stuff like that, though. That doesn't get him what he needs.
It's wild because I grew up in a very academic town in New Jersey. I grew up in a university town at Rutgers, and I have friends with IQs that are like, 5 billion, but they don't know how to like talk to anybody, in the street. And street smarts, I always tell my kids, like, I feel like street smarts, to me at least, much more important than the IQ, just knowing how to get along. But it sounds like, unfortunately, Scott Kimble was good at that. Do you think that, final question here, and then we'll get your final thoughts, but do you think he would get a joy or a kick out of reading The Devil I Knew? Think he ever will?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because that's what I was at CrimeCon this last 2 weeks ago or something. That's the first time I've seen something like that. But that was a question that I got often. It was like that. The answer is no. He will not like the book at all because I shoot down all the pretenses that he put up about, that he cared about his mom. No, you didn't. You did this, this, this. I didn't try to kill my kids. Yes, you did. You did 1, 2, 3, 4. I was sexual, attraction. Nobody could leave me alone. Nope. You preyed upon defenseless women. 1, 2, 3, 4. And all those things do not sit well for him in prison because prison is all about status. He portrays himself as, I'm a serial killer. I'm like, yes, you killed a lot of people, Scott. Yes, you tricked us. Yes, you're very, like you said, intelligent in the way to fool people. But at your core, you are a molester. You commit sex offenses and you steal from your fellow inmates. You take not only their money, but you take their girlfriends and their lives away. And so you have nothing that anybody in prison will respect you for. So
I'm surprised, to put it bluntly, that he hasn't either been shanked, shivved, or gotten his ass kicked in prison. Has that happened?
Well, he's so good at self-protecting, and that he will, he'll deflect blame, and he's pointing to every which way he can. So he's just a master at that stuff.
Wow. So the book, Jonny Grusing, FBI Special Agent retired, Jonny Grusing. It is The Devil I Knew, and tell me the subtitle one more time.
Unmasking a Serial Killer.
Devil I Knew, Unmasking a Serial Killer. Available, I assume, anywhere books are sold. I am going to read this. I feel like this is, Johnny, this is a separate conversation, but I've had a few, with the success of the podcast, had a few producers from the West Coast reach out to ask if, hey, do you have any good stories? This is definitely, when you had me at the helicopter landing in the prison yard right there. So this is a wild story. I don't know how many of you know about Scott Kimble, but it is fascinating. John, I want to give you a final thought here. And also, I think it's important to mention that there are a lot of victims we don't know about. And our thoughts, instead of being with Scott, really should be with the victims and their families. And sadly, Scott's mother passed, and I assume his brother, the airline captain, is still with us. But just your final thoughts here, Johnny.
Yeah, Joel, this was the school of hard knocks, and I do write about this. It took a lot from me. The best analogy that I have is from the movie Green Mile with John Coffey, when he sucked up all the evil from these people that had done these awful things, and you have to go spit it back out. And it challenged me as a dad, as a husband, because I was consuming a lot of this. I saw the awful things that he had done. I was in front of this man a lot, and it took a toll. But what Scott taught me, you can't get from going to uh, detective classes, to investigative seminars, or whatever else. He taught me what narcissism looks like. He taught me what a psychopath, how they act. He taught me what a manipulator does. And so when I was in front of other people who said they didn't kill their kid, or said, no, my wife went missing, I had nothing to do with it, those schools of hard knocks under Scott prepared me. And I think the one thing that I could sense that it's very dangerous, and I tell these high schoolers and college kids this, is narcissism. And there's a lot of different words for it, but if I sniff that in someone who has lost, a family member, and yet they're still at all prideful and look at me and whatever else when that's happening, that is like a hook that I can use to get in, because they will talk as long as you let them be number one. As long as, because Scott had to be smarter than me all the time. You ask how I talked to him for 15 years. I let him beat me every time. It's like, to use the basketball analogy, handing the ball to someone, letting them go shoot a layup so they'll feel good about themselves. Mm-hmm. And then once Scott made his layup, it's like, okay, yeah, I'll spend time with you. And it works. It's amazing, Joel. It would work with stepmoms who would brutally kill their kids as long as they felt like they were in control of the interview. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, yeah, I'll talk to this guy. Because what do they want to do? They want to find out about our case. And that's why Scott had the FBI close to him, is because he wanted to know what we knew. Mm-hmm. And it was a hard lesson, but it helped me to be effective in other cases.
So Johnny was letting Scott get the layups, but then Johnny's draining threes left and right on this guy, and he is where he belongs. You heard he's in the Supermax facility out in Florence, Colorado. The book, the little musical accompaniment, but the book is The Devil I Knew, Unmasking a Serial Killer by Jonny Grusing. Check it out. Go buy it. Obviously, it's an interesting read. Johnny, great to have you back. We're going to get Johnny on as a best guest on some other cases, except Barry Morphew, until he can talk about Barry Morphew. So, Johnny, thank you so much. Love you, America. Love you, Colorado. And Scott Kimball, tell Agent Grusing where the rest of these bodies are, you know what. Stick around 1 second.